You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
All right, Chris, this better be...
Greetings and salutations.
That's been almost every day this week. Very sophisticated.
Actually, I only did it once, and then that was the one we didn't record.
Oh, that's right. We had to delete one, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one had to go in the
So
archives.
Greetings and salutations.
That is fantastic. So our Roland said in fun and practical ways. So it better be fun and it better be practical today.
Yeah,
that's it right
that's
there.
the promise.
So he's Chris and I'm Jeff, and we're the Bible Guys. That's what they tell us.
That's right. So today's segment, we're going to do the Friday segment.
So here we go. It's the Friday segment, and so I'm going to give you a choice. Do you want it to be what made Chris happy this week or what made Chris mad this week? It's up to you. You get to choose.
Well, I already have one for what made Chris mad. So I might
well, you often say that you never get asked. So I thought once you already made up your mind on what made you mad, I thought that I would give you an opportunity to...
Yeah, I am happy a lot.
Yeah, you are. You're a happy person.
Yes,
except when you're mad.
But I am always angry for the world.
That's right. It's part of the cross you bear.
Right. It is. Right? It's part of the cross I bear. So
that you just carry anger and hostility for the rest of the planet.
So I have a small group.
Okay.
And it's really a medium-sized group. We have 17.
Oh wow.
18 to 29-year-olds that meet in my house
for a Bible study.
For a Bible study.
Yeah.
Every Wednesday night. And actually most of them are like 18 to 24-ish. So anyway, the point is that I sort of feel like a student pastor again. Remember when remember when we were student pastors?
Yeah.
Then I did college ministry for a long time, you know?
Wow.
So it's extremely refreshing for us. But one of the things that I encouraged them with, I told them this story, what made me mad. And I said, listen, not everybody, but your generation specifically has a tendency, it's more of a challenge to look strangers in the eye at Kroger and be like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas you and I just grew up with that. Right? There were no screens. Right? And so, at least not of any consequence. So, you could interact with people. Right. So relational things.
Yeah.
But they have a tendency, it's just more difficult. And they all agreed that
to not make eye contact and not address a stranger face to face.
So what happened was we had this really big meeting, the pitch meeting that we had.
Yeah.
I went in for like 3 big Starbucks carafes coffees, those big boxes of coffee.
Uh-huh.
And she says, it's going to take 20 minutes. And I'm like, okay. And anyway, it's a long story, but basically she did everything. As I was shopping, she did everything before my order, and it was like 35 minutes or something. So like she just did not respect the fact that I was there first, right? And so she just did it. Anyway, that's beside the point. So I come back to grab the coffee. I'm going to load in the car. She had already set one that's completed, and she had the other 2. Now keep in mind, I only ordered 3 carafes of coffee.
Right.
That's all I ordered.
And it was just regular coffee.
It was just regular coffee, nothing special.
Yeah, nothing special.
35 minutes later.
Wow.
And so as I'm grabbing this, I say to her, hey, I'm going out to the car because I had already shopped for donuts. And I said, I'm going to go out in the car. Can I take this while you're filling the other 2? So she runs over and throws the other one without saying a word to me, as if like saying, take these 2. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Then I took the 2, went out to the car, realized one wasn't full at all. And I opened them both, realized that one was full and one was literally a third full.
Oh, wow.
The one that she had brought me was wrong. A third full. Who does that?
I don't know.
But I didn't say anything. So I walked back in and I go, hey, I was so polite. I go, hey, I have a question. I go, this one seems a lot lighter. And so without even saying, oh, my bad, or gee, sorry that I tried to jip you out of 3/4 of coffee,
Right.
She didn't say anything. She walked over and she was super, like, she wasn't in a bad mood.
Right.
She was just like not looking at or talking.
Right.
So she just walks over, grabs it, comes back and starts refilling it without saying a single thing. Well, then she gets done with all 3 of them. And then sets them, and she walks over. Now, granted, there's no more customers. No, everybody's gone. She walks over, sets them right in front of me, doesn't even look me in the eye, and then just stares off in space. She's like 22 years old. Didn't even look me in the eye. No, like, my bad. Sorry it took so long.
Right.
Have a nice day. Thanks.
Right.
And listen, normally I don't do this, right?
Uh-huh.
But I was mad. Okay? And I'm serious. I'm not even kidding. Like, I know I'm brazen, but I do not do this.
Right.
I looked at her and I go, thank you. And then she just glanced at me and glanced away, didn't even say anything. And then I go, thank you.
Yeah.
And then she goes, oh, you're welcome. And I go, there you go. Which is so obnoxious, right? It is so obnoxious.
Yeah.
And then she was like, but she was taken back. And she was like, she goes, oh, like it actually like got through. I go, there you go.
Yeah.
And then I walked out because I was so frustrated. I mean,
Right.
like 35 minutes,
Right, yeah.
no apology, right? Try to
yeah.
rip me off with
Yeah.
by accident or whatever.
Yeah.
And then didn't engage. Come on, man.
Right.
And so anyway, all that to say, I blame phones.
Wow. Yeah. She was just in another world going through the motions and not paying attention to the fact that she was serving a customer.
And not only that, but
Yeah.
she somehow must not have learned the value.
Did you see her name on her name tag? Should we go public with this? Where were you at exactly? What was her name?
I was at Kroger at 18 Mile.
No.
But it was the Starbucks in Kroger.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I just think that there's a value there
Yeah.
that was missing in her entire life. I have to imagine that this value isn't instilled in her. She's missing this value.
Right.
Which, by the way, is part of the greatest commandment that God could ever give.
Love God, love people.
Yeah. How about love people?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But we do. We've trained ourselves a lot of times to not look people in the eye, to not engage.
Yes.
So the thing that made Chris mad this week was self-centered servers.
Yeah.
She was in her own little world
I
because
guess
she was looking off into Never Never Land.
I was flooded.
Something was going on up there. Just had nothing to do
Oh
with you.
no! It looked like she was blank.
It had nothing to do with you.
She was not like consumed with any thought.
Okay.
If anything, she was waiting for the time to pass. I felt flooded with this thing that like, wow, like, and that's when you're old, right? When you start judging the next generation.
Yeah.
Everybody's old when they start doing that. But I actually thought to myself, I'm old enough now, I could actually see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could actually see a generation that lacks the value of basic humanity values.
Yeah. I think it's important for us to be conscious because, I mean, we all have the digital distractions and stuff too. It's very important for us to be conscious and to be present, right? Sometimes I'll tease our leadership team or whatever. We'll be in a meeting and everybody's texting or answering phones or whatever. And I try personally, that's an issue for me. And so I try to put my phone down. I'll often turn my phone off when I have a series of meetings in my office so that, hey, these things have turned into digital leashes.
Yeah.
That everybody except the person in the room gets to yank your leash.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So one of the most respectful things I think we can do is to turn the leash off for everybody else and take time with the person in the room.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
But the other part of it is we get so distracted with all the other things and we're not engaging with the human in front of us. And then we wonder why we're so lonely. Right? We need to engage. Human engagement is really important. That whole, I don't think it's a spiritual gift, but I do think it's an intentionality to be present where you are.
Yeah.
And it makes life more enjoyable, by the way, because the human surprises happen there.
Yeah, we better jump into the scriptures because we can go on all day about that.
Speaking engaged and in the present, right?
Right.
So, Chris, thank you for being angry for us on behalf of all the rest of us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
On that
you're welcome,
issue.
Jeff. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. We're starting to think it is.
It's not. It's not.
Okay, good. Here we go. So Jesus predicts his death a second time. So, the disciples kind of are slow sometimes to understand what it is he's talking about. So he repeats himself often. So it says in Matthew chapter 17, after they gathered again in Galilee, Jesus told them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of his enemies. He'll be killed, but on the third day he will be raised from the dead. And the disciples were filled with grief. Remember before, Peter steps up and goes, no, Lord, we're not going to let it happen.
Right.
He says, get behind me, Satan. So they all learn, we're not going to talk about it. We're just going to grieve over it.
Right.
Then in Mark chapter 9, it says, leaving that region, they traveled through Galilee, and Jesus didn't want anyone to know he was there, for he wanted to spend more time with his disciples and teach them. He said to them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of his enemies. He'll be killed, but 3 days later he'll rise from the dead. They didn't understand what he was saying, however, and they were afraid to ask him what he meant. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
And then in Luke chapter 9, it says, while everyone was marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus said to the disciples, listen to me. Remember what I say. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of his enemies, but they didn't know what he meant. Its significance was hidden from them, so they couldn't understand it, and they were afraid to ask him about it. And then it says in Matthew chapter 17, totally different topic, but this is also part of our reading today. It says, on their arrival in Capernaum, remember they've been traveling through Galilee, on their arrival in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked him, doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax? Yes, he does, replied Peter. And then he went into the house. But before he had a chance to speak, Jesus asked him, What do you think, Peter? Do kings tax their own people or the people they've conquered? They tax the people they've conquered, people replied. Well then, Jesus said, the citizens are free. However, we don't want to offend them, so go down to the lake and throw in a line. Open the mouth of the first fish you catch, and you'll find a large silver coin. Take it and pay the tax for both of us.
Yeah, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
So let's and
I've referenced that
in typical
text a couple
fashion.
times.
Yes.
Yeah.
In typical fashion, there's two stories here.
Yeah.
So let's bank on the first three gospel stories about his death.
Yeah.
First, and then we'll get to the coin thing later.
Mm-hmm.
So, by the way, we mentioned this just 2 days ago, but it seems a little weird for us to read at face value why his disciples were confused when it is written so plainly.
So plainly, right?
Hey, I'm going to die.
Right.
And then the Son of Man, which is what I called myself for 3.5 years with you,
Right.
is going to be raised again in 3 days.
Right.
And they're like, I wonder what he means by that.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that he often spoke in metaphors and symbolism, and he would say things like the yeast of the Pharisees, and they're like, I don't get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And he says, how could you not understand what I mean by the yeast of the Pharisees?
Right.
Or, how could you not know that the thorns represent, the cares of this world and all these different things? So he often metaphorically, spoke in these ways. And so it sounds very reasonable to me that they would say, like, I wonder what he means by that. Like, does he really? And they probably contemplated the literal sense.
Yeah.
Like, did he really mean he was going to die?
Right.
Right.
And these guys probably, because they had not been chosen by other rabbis, which was usually the goal of most Jewish parents,
Right.
was to have their sons go up through the temple school or the synagogue school, and they get chosen by a rabbi. That'd be like elite level. Oh, my kid gets to go to Harvard kind of idea.
Right. Which, by the way, side note, which is why that was so significant when Jesus said, "Follow me."
Right.
Right.
Because he chose them when
Right.
they'd been passed over by everybody else.
Yeah.
But that may also be a slight indication that these guys weren't the significant reasoners and thinkers.
They weren't in the top of their class.
Right. They weren't at the top of their class on this one. And so Jesus would have to highlight for them again or be a little bit more specific with them. And for me, that's not looking down on the apostles. That gives me hope for me.
Right.
Right. That he uses just normal guys.
Right.
These are normal people. These are not the top of the class kids. These aren't the elites.
Well,
These are everyday normal guys.
Yeah.
And
Most of the people in the Bible are pretty normal.
yeah,
Right?
and well, I mean, you've got kings and you have Solomon and you have some of
flaws.
them, but you've got flawed people, and God uses these guys. Now he does extract Paul from out of his own time.
Right.
And uses Paul. So he does choose elite leaders and elite thinkers too.
David was pretty elite.
Yeah.
Paul was elite.
Daniel was elite. Joseph was elite.
Yep.
So there are some, Moses was elite. There were some elite people.
Well, Moses even said, "I'm not a communicator. I'm not, I'm not smart."
He was incredibly humble, but he grew up in Pharaoh's home. so he was highly educated
Yeah, that's true.
and very capably
Yeah,
trained.
you're right.
So he's one of those guys who has all the privilege, and he goes, "I don't have any privilege."
right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you and I went knocking on Pharaoh's door, we wouldn't have gotten in.
Right.
And he just
Right.
walked in.
Right.
He said, "Oh, hey, God's sending some judgment." So yeah, he had some elite. God does choose elite people, so he uses everybody. But one of the things I think is fabulous is that these 12 disciples, they're blue collar, everyday guys. So business guys, Matthew, but you got fishermen, you've got political zealots, you got these run of the mill, salt of the earth guys. And so sometimes I think that's part of the reason why they didn't always understand Jesus is talking like a rabbi would talk.
Right.
And they're thinking like fishermen would think.
Yeah, maybe I don't know the scriptures as well as I thought.
Yeah. Would you connect those two things to me? I think that's what's really important for Bible teachers. The most important thing is not to amaze people with the words you say. The most important thing is that they understand what you said.
Do you ever have somebody think about your olden days? Even when they prayed out loud, they just pontificated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they
These and
just,
thous, and they're talking like they're quoting Shakespeare while they're praying. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was anyway. I don't want to. The segment of what made Chris mad is over. So,
but he is
we'll go
telling
on.
them, "I'm going to die." This is the first time he tells them he's going to be betrayed.
Yeah.
Right. So that could have been confusing because he's mentioned before he's going to die, but now he's going to be betrayed. This is starting to sound pretty bad.
Right.
And part of their confusion might have been, what about us?
Sure.
If Jesus can get killed, what about us? because he's only saying he's rising from the dead. He doesn't say we will rise from the dead.
Right.
So there's that.
Hey, just let you know we're all in trouble, but I have Jesus powers.
Right. So it could have just been that, and they were afraid to ask.
It's really funny.
Right. So then we'll move on. So the coin in the fish's mouth,
Sure.
Yeah.
So you went on the Sea of Galilee
yeah.
when you were there just a few months back.
Yeah.
And now, did you go to the restaurant, Peter's restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Now, did they serve you fish?
Serve fish. Yep,
And they
we
put
had
the
fish.
coin in the mouth?
No, we didn't have coin in the mouth.
Okay. So when we were there, back in 2009, we went and had the big whole fish, and then they put it in front of us, and they put a coin, like a plastic coin, in the mouth of the fish, which was just super,
It's so clever.
super funny, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, just the idea of that this happens is just pretty incredible. And there's a lot of little sermons in here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first one is you had mentioned about the age of Peter, right? Why don't you talk about that?
So the typical expectation was that Jewish males would have to pay temple tax every year. They had all kinds of taxes, right? But there was a temple tax, and normally that tax would be for people over 20. And so men over 20. So the idea that Jesus went and had him, it was a 1 drachma tax. So Jesus sends him to go catch a fish, and he gets a 2 drachma coin. And that was enough to pay the taxes for him and Peter. But it doesn't, it literally says it paid the tax for both of us.
Right. And he was talking to Peter.
Yeah. But earlier it says they all arrived in Capernaum. Right. And at the end, it's just there's only 2 of us that pay taxes. So it appears that the rest of the disciples didn't need to pay tax, which means they were young. These guys are probably under 20. So we're guessing at that. It might have only been that the other disciples went on to, stop off at Starbucks before they came over to Peter's house. And it was only Peter and Jesus together when the tax would be collected.
Right.
It could have been that.
Right.
But the other side of it is we do know that John was a teenager and a young teenager at that. And very likely the rest were very young men. The only other one that would be of question maybe would be Matthew, unless he was working in his father's tax. If he was a tax collector apprentice, right, it could have been something like that. But so that one, it would be the one reason why you might think that the other disciples weren't with Jesus.
Yeah, and political zealots, that shows a little bit of,
but young men tend to be zealots.
That's true. That's
right.
true.
Yeah. And then you have to remember they didn't live long either. So by the time you're 20, you're a good way to halfway through your life. Right. Maybe at least a third of the way through your life. And so, they would start earlier. They would, in business and in the real world. But oftentimes you weren't a real adult until you were 30. You were taxable at 20. You weren't a real adult until you were 30 in a lot of their minds. So who knows? But that might be an indication that most of Jesus' followers were very young men. And so we shouldn't overlook the next generation. So on one end, we kind of, we're getting old enough to go, those young people, right? We were just talking about that.
Starbucks.
Yeah, girl. But on the other side, it's important for us to remember that even Jesus is only 30-something here. And the rest of his followers, except for Peter, are much younger than him.
Right.
And so, we have to really believe that Jesus believes in the next generation. We need to, too.
Yeah, that's great. And then the miracle itself. Let's talk about the miracle itself.
Yeah, how cool.
So Peter, again, we have to keep in mind, expert fisherman, right? The odds are like gajillion to 1, right?
Right.
He's like, I need to play the odds here. I need to go to the I was going to say Las Vegas and play a lotto ticket or something.
Oh, right.
But what was the town that was
Caesarea Philippi?
Yeah, Caesarea Philippi. Yeah, I need to go to Caesarea Philippi and show my luck here because I just happened to throw the line in, and the first one I caught was the one that Jesus told me to catch.
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
So I just think that that's pretty amazing. And then for God to do that is also sort of a indicator that he's going to be involved in our lives. Think about it. So the fishing experience was because God could have done anything.
He could have.
God could have said, "There's a coin behind your ear, Peter." Right? He could have done anything. Right? But what does he do? He makes Peter go fishing, and Peter's probably thinking, "Why does he have him
go do what you know, Peter?
Go do what you know, right?"
And I'll bless that.
And so think about this. So God chose to do this miracle in a way that seemed quite unnecessary. But he entered into Peter's world. And it's almost as if what God is saying, how I read it is this: I can do amazing things in your world. I know more things about your life and the nuances of your life. And I could do miraculous things, even when you would think it's impossible.
Yeah.
I could enter into your profession.
Yeah.
I could enter into your family, your history, your legacy, your tendencies, your addictions. And I could do great things right where you are. And I could still amaze you if you just trust me.
Yeah.
And that's what it seems like to me. Like Jesus went out of his way to create something miraculous in the world that Peter knew, to perhaps send a message to Peter that I could still amaze
And
you.
Jesus
in your own
isn't worried
life.
about financial trouble. So here's a guy who says, I don't even have a pillow to lay my head on. I don't have a home to live in.
Right.
But he's not worried about it. And so he's inviting these guys into this very spiritual thing, walking with the Messiah. But then when it comes to the practical things of life, he's not frustrated with them. He said, go do what you know to do.
Right.
And, oh, by the way, God will step into what you'd normally do, and he'll do the supernatural and provide. But I think there's another element. We'll close with this. Jesus had called Peter to leave fishing and said, come with me, I'll make you a fisher of men.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're doing what God says to do, the coin will be in the fish's mouth, right? And so God provided for him in the very thing he was choosing to do. I'm going to train you. There's a whole other level of this fishing thing, but you do have this skill set. I'm going to use that skill set to provide for you. While you're following me, while you're becoming a fisher of men, the coin will be in the fish's mouth. And God will always provide. As you're going forward with him, he'll provide in ways that never will you ever really understand. But he's not going to do it, I don't think, in some weird, obscure way where suddenly you're just going to stumble and trip over a bag of money out in the field. You're going to have to go do the thing you know to do. And then God will just quickly, they didn't have time to wait for 3 days of fishing.
Right.
So he just goes out, poof, there's the fish ready.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that.
And there's also another sermon in here where it's just sort of like, you want to know how valuable money is to me, Jesus says?
Yeah.
Like pulling it out of his pocket would mean like, oh, does he have some cash stored?
Yeah.
Is he making cash as a minister?
Right.
He's like, no. This money here, it's
no big deal.
it's like the pebble in the bottom of the sea, right?
Yeah.
And so, I just think that there's something to.
You know what else? Fish swim. You ever watch fish swimming around in a fish tank?
Yes.
And when one fish goes to the bathroom, the other fish comes and grabs it.
Yes.
Right. That's in his mouth. Well, to Jesus, that's how he thinks of coins.
There
taxes.
you go.
It's the kind of dirt and crap that fish just grab.
Yeah.
Hey, that's of interest to me. That's of interest to you. A brainless fish, just grab it.
Yep.
And that's what's in his mouth at the time. That's how Jesus is viewing the importance of this tax.
Hey, there's all kind of sermons in there, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty creative.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, that's about our time. So we will see you hopefully next time on the Bible Guys.